The collection notice sat cold on my kitchen table, demanding $560,000 for a mortgage I never signed. The thief wasn't some anonymous hacker across the globe. It was my own blood, smiling right at me from our framed family photos. It took me 15 years to build a flawless life. It will take me exactly 30 days to drag their entire empire of lies straight down to hell. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Aurora Brooks. I have always been a woman of logic and precision. Working as a senior data analyst at Aeronex Innovations, my entire career revolves around identifying anomalies, optimizing complex systems, and ruthlessly eliminating errors. But nothing could have prepared me for the catastrophic error currently sitting on my kitchen counter. The envelope had looked ordinary enough when I pulled it from the mailbox, but the document inside felt heavy, printed on thick, intimidating paper. It was a formal notice of foreclosure from a bank I had never done business with. According to the bold black ink, I was the primary signee on a luxury property mortgage, and the account was exactly 6 months past due. The total outstanding balance was a staggering $560,000. My eyes darted to the property address printed at the top of the page. It was located in the highly exclusive Sterling Bay district. I had never stepped foot inside that particular high-rise, but I knew the address by heart. It was the lavish penthouse my biological brother, Donovan, and his wife, Stella, had proudly moved into 1 year ago. Stella came from old money, a family dripping in generational wealth and insufferable arrogance. They had thrown a massive housewarming party, one I was conveniently too busy to attend, or rather, one I was not truly welcome at, given my practical working-class aesthetic never quite matched their champagne-soaked lifestyle. My hands began to tremble, but my mind instantly snapped into its analytical mode. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number at the bottom of the letter. After navigating a tedious maze of automated prompts, a representative named Sarah answered the line. "I received a foreclosure notice, but there has clearly been a massive mistake," I said, forcing my voice to remain perfectly steady. "I do not own a property in Sterling Bay, and I certainly did not take out a mortgage of over $500,000. Let me pull up your file, ma'am." Sarah replied calmly. I heard the rapid clacking of her keyboard. "For security purposes, can you verify your social security number?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gave her the digits. "Thank you. And to confirm, you are Aurora Brooks, born on October 12, 1989, and currently employed at Aeronex Innovations?" All the breath left my lungs in a violent rush. "Yes, that is correct. But how do you have all of that?" "Ma'am, you provided this information when you signed the mortgage documents in person. We have your W-2 forms, your tax returns, and a certified copy of your driver's license on file." I ended the call without another word. The silence in my apartment was suddenly deafening. My identity had not just been stolen, it had been cloned with absolute perfection. Panic is a useless, paralyzing emotion, so I pushed it down deep into my chest. I immediately logged into my laptop and pulled my comprehensive credit report. The screen loaded, and the nightmare deepened exponentially. It was not just the Sterling Bay mortgage. There were 4 premium credit cards opened in my name over the past 8 months. Every single one of them was completely maxed out. Thousands of dollars spent on designer clothing, luxury dining, and first-class flights. My previously immaculate credit score, a perfect 810 that I had meticulously maintained since college, was utterly destroyed. I stared at the glowing screen, tracing the timeline of the fraudulent accounts. Who had access to my W-2 forms? Who had my private tax returns? Who possessed a high-resolution photocopy of my driver's license and my social security number? The realization hit me with the sheer force of a physical blow. Elias was not just my personal financial advisor. He was my oldest, most trusted friend. We had known each other for over 10 years. I trusted him implicitly with my life. I had handed over every piece of my financial existence to his firm to manage my investments and retirement accounts. He was a regular guest at my dinner table. He knew Donovan well. He knew my entire family dynamics. A cold, dark clarity washed over my brain. This was an inside job. Donovan, Stella, and Elias. They had formed a parasitic alliance, draining my financial lifeblood to fund their pathetic illusions of grandeur. They thought I was just a naive workaholic who would blindly trust the professionals and never check the fine print until it was far too late. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw my phone against the wall or frantically call Donovan to demand answers. Instead, I stood up and walked straight to the front door, turning the heavy deadbolt until it clicked shut. I walked into the kitchen, ground some dark roast beans, and brewed a strong, bitter cup of black coffee. I sat back down at the table, took out a crisp, blank notepad, and grabbed my favorite heavy ink pen. I wrote 3 names at the top of the white page: Donovan, Stella, Elias. They thought they could use me as their personal piggy bank and leave me holding the burning ashes of my own life. They severely underestimated the very nature of my profession. I am someone who dismantles systems that are broken. I took a slow sip of my scalding coffee and began to map out their total ruin, vowing to myself that they would not see the executioner coming until the blade was already falling. I needed a professional ghost, the kind of person who could walk through digital walls and drag secrets out of encrypted vaults. I found Victor. He was a former forensic accountant for the federal government who had transitioned into the lucrative world of private investigation, specializing exclusively in high-stakes corporate fraud. We did not meet in a bright corporate boardroom. I instructed him to meet me at a rundown, neon-lit diner on the absolute outskirts of the city, miles away from my usual pristine routines. I slid a thick, organized file across the sticky laminate table. Victor opened it, his eyes scanning the fraudulent mortgage papers and the maxed-out credit statements. He did not ask how I was feeling. He only asked for 48 hours and a retainer of $10,000. I wired him the funds instantly. The wait was agonizing, but my patience was rewarded with a nightmare of unprecedented scale. 2 days later, Victor bypassed the heavily guarded firewalls of the Sterling Bay Property Registry. We sat in his windowless basement office as he projected a dizzying web of transactions onto the wall. "The penthouse is not in Donovan's name," Victor stated, his voice flat and mechanical. "He and Stella are just listed as permanent occupants. The deed itself is held by a holding corporation called Obsidian Apex." "Who owns Obsidian Apex?" I asked, my eyes tracing the red lines on the projection. Victor clicked a button, bringing up a complex legal hierarchy. "It is a shell company, buried beneath 4 other shell companies registered in tax havens. But if you follow the authorized signatory chain to the very top, you find one name: Arthur. Stella's father, the prestigious, untouchable real estate magnate. He was the puppet master orchestrating this entire illusion, but that still did not explain how they acquired my biometric data and highly classified financial history." Victor poured us both a glass of water before delivering the killing blow. "Your friend Elias, the man managing your portfolio, he has a secret life. Aurora, a crippling addiction to high-stakes underground baccarat. 3 months ago, he racked up a debt of $250,000 with some very dangerous people. They were going to break his legs, or worse." The puzzle pieces violently snapped together in my mind. "Arthur bought the debt." "Exactly," Victor confirmed. "Arthur paid off the syndicate. In exchange, Elias handed over the keys to your financial kingdom. He sold your social security number, your verified tax returns, and decades of pristine credit history directly to Arthur. Elias packaged you up and sold you to save his own life." My blood turned to ice, but a lingering question remained. Banks have rigorous verification protocols. When authorizing a mortgage of over $500,000, they ask security questions that no piece of paper can answer. The name of my first-grade teacher, the hospital where I broke my arm, my specific daily routines, Victor pulled out a printed transcript of encrypted messages. They had an inside informant, someone who coached Elias on exactly what to say and when to intercept the bank's phone calls so you would never be notified. I looked down at the paper. The messages were from Donovan, my own flesh and blood. My brother had systematically mapped out my work schedule, detailing the exact hours I would be trapped in secure server rooms without cellular service. He had handed them my childhood secrets on a silver platter. He had sold me out so he could drink expensive champagne on a balcony overlooking the bay. "There is one more thing. Aurora," Victor said, leaning closer, his expression grim. "And this is the part that could put you in federal prison for 20 years. Arthur is completely broke. His legitimate real estate empire is collapsing under massive debts. He is using your pristine, clean name and that luxury penthouse to wash dirty money. They are funneling millions of dollars from an international economic crime syndicate through the property's maintenance and phantom renovation accounts. If the authorities raided that penthouse, the paper trail led directly to me. I would be framed as the mastermind of a massive money laundering operation. I was the sacrificial lamb waiting to be slaughtered. In that exact second, something fundamental inside me died. Any lingering trace of sisterly affection, any hesitation, any moral conflict about destroying my own family evaporated into the cold, recycled air of Victor's office. They were no longer my blood. They were parasites, and I was going to exterminate them. I needed undeniable physical proof to link Elias to the money laundering accounts. I could not rely purely on Victor's hacked data. I needed the original source files. The next morning, I dressed in a tailored navy suit, looking exactly like the successful, oblivious tech executive they all believed me to be. I purchased 2 cups of overpriced, artisanal vanilla lattes and walked straight through the glass doors of Elias's boutique financial firm. "Aurora, what a wonderful surprise," Elias said, practically leaping out of his luxurious leather chair as I entered his office. His smile was so warm, so flawlessly genuine, it made my stomach churn. "I was just in the neighborhood for a client meeting," I said, handing him a coffee. "Thought I would drop by and say hello." We chatted mindlessly for 5 minutes about the stock market and his upcoming golf trip. Then, right on schedule, his desk phone rang. It was a decoy call orchestrated by Victor, utilizing a spoofed number from a high-profile client Elias had been desperately trying to court. "I have to take this. Aurora, give me 2 minutes," Elias said, his eyes lighting up with greed as he stepped out into the hallway for privacy. The second the door clicked shut, my friendly smile vanished. I moved with the terrifying speed and precision of a machine. I stepped behind his massive mahogany desk and plugged a highly sophisticated, encrypted flash drive into the hidden port of his computer tower. A custom script Victor had written executed instantly. It bypassed the local security protocols and began mirroring the hidden offshore ledgers Elias kept buried in a disguised folder. The progress bar crawled. 10%, 40%, 70%. I heard Elias's booming laugh echoing from the hallway. He was walking back. 90%, 100%. I snatched the flash drive, slipped it smoothly into the hidden pocket of my blazer, and was back sitting casually on the guest sofa, casually sipping my latte, just as the heavy wooden door swung open. "Sorry about that," Elias chuckled, completely unaware that he had just handed me the very weapon I would use to destroy him. Now, where were we? "Just leaving, actually," I smiled, looking him dead in the eyes. "I have a lot of work to do." The call came exactly 2 days later at 6 o'clock in the evening. Donovan's voice through the speaker sounded sickeningly cheerful. "Aurora, it has been far too long. Stella and I are hosting a small, intimate dinner this Friday at 8 o'clock. We want to celebrate a massive new family business project, and we absolutely need you there. Arthur is flying in as well." I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop, feeling a cold knot twist in my stomach. The trap was finally being set. "I would love to," I replied, forcing a bright smile into my tone. Fast forward to Friday night. The Sterling Bay penthouse was located on the 42nd floor. The private elevator doors slid open to reveal a monument to unearned arrogance. Imported Italian marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city skyline, and grotesque modern art pieces hung on the walls. Pieces that undoubtedly cost more than my entire retirement fund. Stella greeted me with a theatrical kiss on both cheeks, her neck heavy with an extravagant diamond necklace purchased by my stolen credit. "Aurora, darling, you look so, well, practical," she cooed, her eyes dragging up and down my simple black dress with poorly disguised disdain. "Thank you, Stella. This place is breathtaking," I said smoothly. Stepping into the massive living room, Arthur was waiting in the formal dining area. He was a tall, imposing man with perfectly styled silver hair and eyes as flat and lifeless as wet concrete. He did not hug me. He merely shook my hand, his grip slightly too tight, assessing me not as a person, but as a living asset on his collapsing balance sheet. Dinner was a 5-course display of nauseating excess: truffle risotto, gold leaf Wagyu beef, and wine that cost $4,000 a bottle. Throughout the meal, Stella did not stop talking. She boasted about their upcoming 2-week vacation to the Maldives, the $50,000 interior designer they had just hired, and how exhausting it was to manage so much wealth. Every single word she spoke, every bite of food she swallowed, was financed by the financial noose they had secretly tied around my neck. I played my part flawlessly. I laughed at their terrible jokes, praised their exquisite taste, and made sure to continuously empty my wine glass. Of course, I was barely swallowing a drop. I subtly spit the dark red liquid back into my water goblet when they looked away, playing the role of the stressed, overworked sister unwinding with free alcohol. By 9:30, the dessert plates were cleared, and the psychological warfare commenced. Donovan cleared his throat, his posture stiffening. He reached to the sideboard and produced a sleek leather folder, sliding it across the polished surface of the massive oak dining table. "Aurora, we actually invited you here for a very specific reason," Donovan began, his voice dripping with practiced, honeyed sincerity. "Arthur and I are launching a revolutionary commercial real estate venture. It is going to yield a return of over 300% within the first year. We want to keep this strictly in the family. We are offering you a seat on the board of directors as a silent partner." Arthur leaned forward, resting his heavy arms on the table. "It is a golden opportunity, my dear. You will not have to lift a finger. Just sign the authorization forms, and you will share in the profits. Think of it as a gift." I looked down at the documents. I did not need to read the fine print to know what this was. This was not a business venture. It was a retroactive legal authorization form, heavily disguised under layers of complex corporate jargon, designed to legitimize my forged signature on the $500,000 loan. If my pen touched that paper, the fraud became a legally binding reality, and they would be completely untouchable. Wow, I am speechless. I slurred slightly, letting my head sway just a fraction to sell the intoxication. I picked up the solid gold pen Donovan eagerly nudged toward me. His eyes were wide, hungry, fixated on my hand. Then, I executed the maneuver I had practiced dozens of times in the absolute isolation of my apartment. I aggressively knocked my elbow against the edge of the table. My wine glass tipped over, sending a splash of leftover red liquid across the expensive linen runner. "Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly clumsy," I gasped, dropping the pen and immediately diving under the table with my cloth napkin. "It is fine, Aurora, just leave it," Stella snapped, her fake sweetness instantly vanishing at the sight of a stain on her pristine table. Down in the shadows beneath the heavy oak table, hidden entirely from their view, I was not wiping up wine. With lightning speed, I pulled a micro-audio transmitter, no larger than a jacket button, from the hem of my dress. I pressed the adhesive backing firmly against the underside of the wooden tabletop, right beneath where Arthur was sitting. I crawled back up, my face flushed, acting completely flustered and embarrassed. "I am so sorry. I think the wine is going straight to my head," I babbled, pushing the leather folder back toward Donovan. "This looks amazing. Guys, truly, But I cannot sign this tonight. Donovan's jaw clenched. The charming, brotherly mask cracked. Aurora, it is just a formality. It takes 10 seconds. The lawyers need it filed by tomorrow morning. I understand. But you know how insane Aeronex Innovations is, I said, putting on my best helpless corporate drone expression. Section 4. Paragraph 12 of my employment contract strictly prohibits me from signing outside financial directorships without clearing it through our internal legal compliance team first. If I sign this blindly and they audit me, I could lose my company stock options. I have to take it home and read it over the weekend. I will bring it back on Monday. Arthur's concrete eyes narrowed. The silence in the room became thick and suffocating, heavy enough to crush bone. He was calculating the risk of forcing my hand versus letting me walk out the door. Fine, Arthur finally said, his voice dropping an octave, devoid of all previous warmth. Take it home, read it carefully, but we need it back by Monday at 8 in the morning. No delays. Of course, I smiled brightly, clutching my purse. Thank you for such a lovely evening. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the cold night air, 3 blocks away from the Sterling Bay building. I pulled out my secure phone, plugged in my earpiece, and activated the live feed from the transmitter. The audio was crystal clear. She knows something, Arthur's voice hissed through the speaker, vibrating with barely contained rage. She was not drunk. That was a calculated delay. She does not know anything, Donovan argued frantically. She is just a paranoid corporate robot. She will read the cover page and sign it by Sunday. I promise you. Your promises are worthless. Donovan, the shell company is bleeding cash. We have a federal audit approaching in 14 days. If she takes that document to a real lawyer, we are all going to federal prison. There was a heavy pause, followed by the terrifying sound of ice clinking in a glass. Call the fixer in Chicago. If she does not deliver that signed paper by Sunday night, she does not make it to work on Monday. A brake failure on the highway. A tragic, fatal accident. We are the sole beneficiaries of her corporate life insurance policy anyway. That will be more than enough to cover the remaining debt and wash the slate clean. I stood frozen on the sidewalk as the chilling words echoed in my ear. They did not just want to steal my money. They were actively planning to end my life. I did not drive to the local police station. A man with Arthur's immense wealth and political connections likely owned the local precinct, buying their loyalty with anonymous campaign donations and favors. If I filed a report there, Arthur would know about it before the ink was even dry, and I would suffer that fatal highway accident before the sun came up. Instead, I drove straight to the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office, parked in the visitor lot, and demanded to speak with the Financial Crimes Division. Special Agent Hayes was a veteran investigator with sharp eyes and a permanently exhausted expression. He sat across from me in a windowless interrogation room, sipping terrible break-room coffee. I did not waste time with tears or emotional backstories. I placed the encrypted flash drive I had stolen from Elias on the metal table, right next to the micro-audio transmitter containing the recording of Arthur and Donovan discussing my impending murder. Hayes listened to the audio. He plugged the drive into a secure air-gap terminal and scrolled through the offshore ledgers. His exhausted expression vanished, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a hound catching a scent. We have been trying to build a racketeering case against Arthur for 3 years, Agent Hayes said, his voice low and tight. He is running one of the largest corporate laundering hubs on the eastern seaboard, but he always uses shell companies to insulate himself. You just handed us the entire plumbing system of his operation, but to make this stick in federal court, we need to catch them actively destroying evidence and moving the illicit funds. We need a panic. You want me to shake the tree, I replied instantly. Exactly. We need you to be the bait. If you trigger a panic, they will scramble to communicate. We will have wiretaps on every single phone line connected to Elias, Donovan, and Arthur within 12 hours. Are you willing to wear a wire and look these men in the eye? Give me the microphone, I said. At exactly 8 o'clock on Monday morning, I sat at my desk at Aeronex Innovations, staring at the panoramic view of the city. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias's private office line. Special Agent Hayes and his team were listening live from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. "Elias, good morning," I said, my voice projecting the perfect pitch of mild, administrative confusion. I was reviewing my personal tax portal over the weekend, preparing for an upcoming internal audit at work. I found a massive anomaly. There are capital gains listed from a foreign holding entity I do not recognize, tied directly to my Social Security number. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Aurora, you must be misreading the portal. The tax codes can be incredibly confusing for lay people. I am a senior data analyst. Elias, I do not misread numbers," I replied, letting a hint of stern frustration bleed into my tone. "The routing numbers trace back to Cyprus. This looks highly illegal. I am drafting a formal report to submit to the Federal Financial Regulatory Commission this afternoon, just to protect myself." "No, absolutely do not do that," Elias shouted, his polished demeanor completely shattering. "Do not send anything to the commission. Give me 24 hours to fix the clerical error. I promise you, it is just a glitch. 24 hours. Elias, then I am hitting send," I said, and hung up. The trap snapped shut. According to Agent Hayes, Elias did not even wait 5 seconds before frantically dialing Donovan. Then Arthur. The federal agents recorded every single word of their screaming matches. Elias was hyperventilating, begging Arthur for protection. Arthur, furious and arrogant, ordered an immediate, total purge of the secondary server racks and instructed them to wire the remaining dirty cash into a series of backup dummy accounts. By trying to hide the money, they directly handed the federal agents the exact account numbers of their secret reserves. But I still needed to neutralize Donovan. He was slippery, constantly hiding behind Arthur's legal team. I needed him to explicitly confess to his role in the laundering. I texted my brother, demanding an urgent, in-person meeting to discuss the contract he had tried to force on me at dinner. We agreed to meet at a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop on the edge of the financial district at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Donovan walked in wearing a bespoke suit, radiating unearned confidence. He ordered an imported espresso and sat across from me with a smug, patronizing smile. Underneath my silk blouse, a federal recording device was capturing his every breath. I slid a thick, heavily redacted document across the table. It was a fake contract engineered by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, filled with complex legal traps. I had an independent corporate attorney look at the framework of your proposal. "Donovan," I said, crossing my arms. "They said the promised yield of 300% is mathematically impossible unless the capital is being moved through unregulated, phantom channels. I am not signing my name to anything until you tell me exactly how you are generating this cash. I am not going to be your liability." Donovan scoffed, leaning back in his chair. His ego was his greatest weakness. He fundamentally believed I was just a rigid, unimaginative drone who could not comprehend his level of financial genius. "You tech people are so paralyzed by the rules," Donovan sneered, leaning in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Real wealth is fluid, sis. We do not just invest money, we clean it. Arthur has overseas associates who need to park their capital in secure American assets. We funnel their money into the property management accounts of the Sterling Bay penthouse. Through fake invoices," I prompted smoothly, guiding him right into the slaughterhouse. "Exactly," Donovan smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. "We draft phantom renovation bills, hundreds of thousands of dollars for Italian marble that never arrives. Plumbers who do not exist. The shell company pays the fake invoices with the overseas cash. The bank processes it, and the money comes out spotless on the other side as legitimate property equity. It is brilliant, and it is completely untraceable. You just sign the paper, collect your percentage, and look the other way." He reached into his jacket, pulled out his solid gold pen, and aggressively signed the bottom of the fake contract to demonstrate how easy it was. "See, nothing to it," he said, pushing the paper back to me. "You are right, Donovan," I said softly, looking at his signature. "It is completely brilliant." I stood up, leaving the coffee untouched, and walked out of the cafe. In the surveillance van down the street, Agent Hayes had just secured everything he needed to bury my brother alive. Saturday night arrived, bringing with it the grandest social event of the season. Stella was celebrating her 30th birthday at the Grand Monarch, the most exclusive five-star hotel in the city center. I did not receive an invitation, of course, but I knew the exact schedule of events because Agent Hayes had mapped out every single second of the evening. The ballroom was a monument to their stolen wealth. Through the secure federal drone feed, Agent Hayes let me view earlier that evening. I saw ice sculptures dripping with imported caviar, towers of champagne glasses, and hundreds of the city's elite mingling under crystal chandeliers. Local media photographers roamed the floor, capturing the flawless image of the powerful, untouchable family. Stella was parading around in a custom silk gown, a massive diamond tiara resting on her head, completely oblivious to the fact that every single thread she wore was purchased with a federal crime. At exactly 9:30 in the evening, Arthur stepped up to the grand podium at the front of the ballroom. He tapped his spoon against a crystal flute, silencing the massive crowd. He adjusted his expensive tuxedo and leaned into the microphone, flashing a predatory, commanding smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur's booming voice echoed through the vast hall. "Tonight, we do not just celebrate my beautiful daughter, we celebrate family. We celebrate the kind of legacy that cannot be broken, built on a foundation of brilliant investments and unbreakable trust." He raised his glass. The crowd prepared to applaud. They never got the chance. A deafening screech of heavy tires ripped through the polite silence. It was not just one vehicle. It was an entire fleet. Dozens of black, armored tactical trucks screeched to a halt, completely blockading the main entrance of the hotel. Red and blue emergency lights instantly painted the tall glass windows of the ballroom, washing Arthur's pale face in a chaotic, flashing strobe. The heavy brass doors of the ballroom were violently kicked open. Over 50 federal agents, wearing heavy tactical vests with the letters FBI printed in bold yellow, flooded into the room. "Nobody move! Hands where we can see them!" a commanding voice roared over a bullhorn. The classical string quartet abruptly stopped playing. The elite crowd erupted into a chorus of panicked screams, dropping their expensive drinks on the marble floor. Agent Hayes walked straight down the center aisle, his eyes locked entirely on the podium. Arthur's confident facade crumbled instantly, replaced by sheer, arrogant outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" he barked into the microphone, pointing a shaking finger at Hayes. "Do you have any idea who I am? I know the governor. I will have your badge for this outrage. Arthur Vance, you are under arrest for federal racketeering, grand wire fraud, and severe money laundering," Agent Hayes announced, his voice carrying effortlessly over the shrieking crowd. He did not slow down. He marched right up the steps of the podium, grabbed Arthur by his tailored shoulder, and violently spun him around. "Get your hands off me!" Arthur roared, struggling wildly, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple. The resistance lasted exactly 2 seconds. Hayes swept Arthur's legs, forcing the powerful magnate down to his knees in front of hundreds of flashing cameras from the local media. The metallic click of the heavy steel handcuffs echoed loudly into the microphone. His empire was officially dead. While Arthur was being dragged away, Donovan was scrambling like a terrified rat. He had seen the raid begin and immediately abandoned his wife. He sprinted through the swinging doors of the catering kitchen, dodging terrified chefs, and burst out into the dark. Rain-slicked loading alley behind the hotel. He thought he had escaped, but waiting for him under the flickering amber street lamp, leaning casually against a brick wall with a lit cigarette, was Victor. "Going somewhere, Donovan?" Victor asked, his voice rough and laced with dark amusement. Donovan froze, his eyes darting frantically toward the street. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my way!" "I am the guy your sister hired to dig your grave." Victor smiled grimly. He stepped aside, revealing 4 armed officers who immediately tackled Donovan into the wet garbage, pressing his face directly into the filthy asphalt. Back in the ballroom, absolute hysteria had consumed Stella. She was shrieking at the top of her lungs. fighting desperately as a female federal agent approached her. "Ma'am, I need you to remove the necklace and the tiara," the agent ordered coldly. "They are considered stolen assets, purchased with laundered funds." "No! You cannot do this! This is my birthday! We are rich! You are ruining my life!" Stella sobbed wildly, her perfectly styled hair falling into a messy, chaotic tangle as the glittering jewels were physically unclasped from her neck and placed into a clear plastic evidence bag. Agent Hayes then handed her a formal document, loudly declaring that the Sterling Bay penthouse was officially sealed and seized by the federal government. She had absolutely nothing left. She was instantly homeless. At that exact moment, 20 miles away, the final loose end was being severed. The radio on Agent Hayes' shoulder crackled to life. It was a unit stationed at the international airport. Elias had been apprehended at Gate 42, clutching a one-way first-class boarding pass to South America. The moment the handcuffs touched his wrists, the polished, confident financial advisor completely broke down. He fell to his knees in the middle of the terminal, sobbing uncontrollably, begging for a plea deal and offering to testify to every single crime Arthur had ever committed in exchange for a lighter sentence. I did not witness the chaos inside the hotel, nor did I see Elias crying at the terminal. I stood quietly in the freezing night air, completely concealed in the deep shadows of an alleyway on the opposite side of the street from the Grand Monarch. I wore a heavy trench coat, my hands tucked deep into my pockets. I watched the massive glass doors swing open. I watched the tactical teams drag Arthur out, his head bowed, humiliated and broken. I watched them throw Donovan into the back of a heavily armored police transport van. The flashing red and blue lights washed over my face, but I felt absolutely no warmth, no pity, and no remorse. They had tried to bury me alive under a mountain of debt and lies. They had planned to murder me on a highway to cash a life insurance check. I took a slow, deep breath of the crisp city air as the sirens began to fade into the distance. The execution was flawless. Now, all that remained was the final swing of the hammer. The wheels of federal justice normally turn at an agonizingly slow pace, but my case was a high-speed bullet train. The sheer volume of undeniable proof I had delivered to Agent Hayes left absolutely no room for legal maneuvering. Between the crystal-clear audio recording of the murder plot, the decrypted flash drive mirroring the illicit ledgers, and Elias crying on the witness stand in exchange for a lighter sentence, the trial was essentially over before it began. Not a single high-powered defense attorney in the state could save Arthur or Donovan. They sat at the defense table in their oversized, bright orange jumpsuits, their previous arrogance completely hollowed out. They looked like exactly what they were: pathetic, broken old men. The true climax of their destruction, however, did not come from the judge reading the guilty verdict. It came during the sentencing phase. Working closely with the federal prosecutor, I had drafted a highly specific, airtight legal injunction. I stood up in the quiet courtroom, holding a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor," I addressed the judge, my voice steady and ringing clearly across the oak-paneled room. The defendants did not just attempt to steal my identity. They attempted to obliterate my future. This document mandates immediate financial restitution prior to the execution of their prison sentences. The injunction was a financial guillotine. It legally compelled Arthur and Donovan to fully repatriate every single cent of their hidden offshore reserves back to American soil. Those funds were instantly seized. First, they were forced to pay off the fraudulent $560,000 mortgage entirely in cash. Second, the state extracted massive punitive fines for the money laundering operation. Finally, the remainder of their hidden wealth was liquidated and transferred directly to me as compensation for severe emotional distress and reputational damage. Donovan visibly wept, burying his face in his trembling hands, finally realizing his unearned arrogance had cost him his entire existence. Arthur simply stared at the floor, his once terrifying eyes wide with the shocking realization that he had been utterly outsmarted by the very woman he thought was merely a naive pawn. By the time the ink dried on the judge's order, they were not just going to federal prison for 20 years. They were going to prison with absolute zero to their names. 2 months later, the Sterling Bay penthouse went up for public auction. I attended the event, taking a seat in the very back row of the crowded hall. I was not there to bid. I was there to watch. I sat quietly as the auctioneer called out the numbers, watching a wealthy, anonymous real estate developer purchase the property for a fraction of its original value. The imported Italian marble, the crystal chandeliers, and the nauseating memories of that suffocating dinner party were wiped off the map. Stella was nowhere to be seen, reportedly living in a tiny, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city, completely abandoned by her former high society friends. As for my own life, the restoration was absolute. The federal court order acted as a universal eraser. Every single fraudulent credit card was wiped from my record. My credit score rebounded instantly, returning to its flawless 810. But the bank that had so easily handed over a fortune in my name did not escape unpunished. Fearing a catastrophic public relations nightmare over their shockingly negligent security protocols, their corporate legal team begged for an out-of-court settlement. They sent a formal, deeply groveling letter of apology, accompanied by a massive financial payout that comfortably doubled my already substantial retirement portfolio. My revenge was not just about survival, it was about supreme, mathematical dominance. I had successfully dismantled their empire of lies and built a fortress of wealth upon its ashes. The heavy brass doors of the federal courthouse pushed open, and I stepped out onto the wide stone stairs. The midday sun was blindingly bright, washing over the bustling city streets. I took a deep breath of the warm, clean air. There was no more anxiety, no more shadow of betrayal lingering over my shoulder. I was completely free, fiercely independent, and wealthier than I had ever been in my entire life. I adjusted my sunglasses, turned my back on the courthouse, and walked confidently down the steps, leaving the dark, rotting past behind me forever. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Boss Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.